Same exact principle applies here, and that is this. The moment that your messaging and your communications focus on you, what you're doing, your services, your definitions, your lingo, whatever it is, your patients are going to start to lose interest in you, and they're going to start to mentally check out. They're going to mentally start looking. They're going to start searching. Their brain is going to start saying, hey, listen, I'm burning a lot of useless calories here. This doesn't make sense. Maybe we're in the wrong place after all. So utilizing technical speak, dental speak, if you will, and we'll talk about the curse of knowledge here in just a little bit, but talking over your patient's head, whether it's in a case presentation, whether it's in an office visit, whether it's in your website copy, doesn't matter. You've got to talk in language they can understand, and you've got to talk in a way that pulls them in and keeps them as the hero in their own story.
Have you ever had a dream that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world?
What is happening to me?
The answer is out there. It's the question that drives us.
What is a DotCom Dentist?
The DotCom Dentist uncovers the world that's been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
They're watching you.
Successful dentists like you are a disease. You are a cancer to the corporate model. And we are the cure.
Get me a computer and an internet connection.
Welcome to the real world.
So you're here to save the dental profession?
So what do you need?
Marketing weapons. Lots of marketing weapons.
No one's ever done anything like this.
That's why it's going to work.
Buckle your seatbelt, Dorothy. 'Cause Kansas is going bye-bye.
Unfortunately, no one can be told what a DotCom Dentist is. You have to see it for yourself.
Hey everybody, Ken Newhouse here from DotCom Dentist, and I want to welcome you back to the second episode of the DotCom Dentist podcast, the show that's about helping you clarify your messaging and communications so you can attract high-value fee-for-service new patients, increase your production, and become more profitable. And while I won't have the benefit of having her with me each week, in fact, I should say while we won't, as an audience, have the benefit of having her with us each week, we've got the beautiful and talented Lisa Newhouse. It's my wife. Got her back in the studio with us for another episode today, which is always a good thing. So, how you doing today, Lisa?
I'm doing great. How are you?
It's awesome to have you back in studio with us today. That first show was incredibly fun, and I know we're going to have as much fun today as we did on that show, if not more. So episode number 1 is under our belt. Got that finished. Actually getting some really good feedback from that first episode. And while I just actually go, if not more. So episode number 1 is under our belt. Got that finished. Actually getting some really good feedback from that first episode. And while I just mentioned this, I realize I'm not going to have you in the studio with me here for a lot of the shows. In fact, you have your own business, your own work to do. But while I got you here in studio, while we've got you here in studio, going to definitely make use of that and enjoy that time with you and certainly benefit from it. You did an absolutely fabulous job on that first episode. I know you'll do the same today. So if you're ready,
I'm ready.
let's roll.
All right.
Okay, so in our last episode, we talked about what it means to be a DotCom dentist. We also talked about the messaging and communications you're using and how they play a pivotal role in the success and profitability of your practice. We talked about the importance of having a high converting website for your practice and specifically what makes a high converting website different from the lame money sucking websites that most dentists have. We'll actually be doing a show on high converting websites over the next couple of weeks, and the important thing is that your website should serve as one of the primary profit generators for your practice. That's a writer downer. Listen, your website literally should be one of the primary modes of new patient traffic, one of the primary sources of new patient traffic for your practice. And if it's not, you obviously don't have a high converting website. We also introduced the practice storyline framework and how the world's most successful companies, as an example, we talked about Apple, are using a storyline based model, a narrative based theme in their business. And if you're not up to speed with what that narrative based business model actually looks like, and if you'd actually like to know how it can transform your practice, I want to suggest that you go back and listen to episode number 1 after you're done listening to today's episode so you can start benefiting from this framework right away. Now, on today's show, me and Lisa are going to be talking about the importance of developing clear and concise messaging and communications for your practice. And the reason for doing that is so you can start attracting more of those high-value fee-for-service new patients, increase your case acceptance, and make your practice more profitable. And that's the objective, the goal for today's show. So Lisa, if you're ready, let's go ahead and get started. Let's do this.
All right, so in your eyes, Ken, what is one of the biggest challenges that dentists are facing today as it relates to having a thriving and successful practice?
Well, if you're listening to this podcast, there's a reason, and it's a good reason, and that's that all dentists want to make their practice more profitable, and they want to do that without having to work harder, and they realize that more of the same isn't going to help them get there. In fact, I think it's fair to say that most of them are looking for new and effective methods to make that happen. The good news is that the way to make your practice more profitable without having to work harder goes back to what we talked about on episode 1, which is to clarify your messaging and your communications. And when you clarify your messaging, when you clarify your communications, patients are going to be attracted to you and they're going to listen to what you have to say, especially those high-value fee-for-service patients that every dentist wants. Listen, if you can make your messaging and your communications crystal clear, patients, especially the ones who aren't relying on insurance to pay for their treatment, are going to take notice and they're going to listen to what you have to say. Now, to help illustrate the importance of clear messaging and communications, listen to the short story Karen Buxman told at a TED Talk back in 2013. Buxman is an international speaker, successful author, and neurohumorist, which, as she puts it, lives at the intersection of brain, science, and humor. And if you're like me, you're absolutely going to love this. Take a listen.
One of the things that we have to deal with is communication. And sometimes we think we're doing a good job of communicating, but really people are not hearing what we're saying. I remembered this incident that happened back when I was in pre-K. It was a little tiny one-school pre-K in Hannibal, Missouri. Our teacher was Mrs. Seeley. She was nice but strict. And it was the end of the day, and all of us were to get on our coats and our boots and our mittens. We're sitting on our little red benches, big as saucers. She was just sitting there, Mrs. Seeley looked over and saw her sitting there, and she goes, Jill, get your boots on. And Jill simply looked at her and said, I can't get these boots on. So Mrs. Seeley goes over, drops to her knees, and she starts shoving, working up a sweat, and she finally gets one boot on, and then the other, she shoves, and she finally gets that boot on. She's like, Jill, these boots, they barely fit you. Jill looks at her and said, they're not my boots. Mrs. Seeley's face became pale. She dropped to her knees and she starts pulling, and she gets a boot off, pulls and pulls, finally gets the other boot off, holds the boots up to the class. She goes, all right, whose boots are these? Jill looks up at her and says, they're my brother's. Now I thought Mrs. Seeley was gonna cry. She drops back down to her knees, shoves. When she finally stands up, she's like, Jill, where's your mittens? In the boots. As a leader, you gotta be listening and communicating clearly.
So developing clear and concise messaging and communications is critical to the success and profitability of your practice. And in fact, not having your messaging and communications nailed down is one of the reasons why most of the marketing dentists are spending money on today doesn't produce new patients.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I worked in the dental industry for at least 12 or 13 years, and I saw it on a regular basis. And I would say that one of the biggest problems dentists have is that they're wasting enormous amounts of money on marketing collateral, especially on their websites. So tell me, why is this happening? And can you give a few examples that will shed some more light on this subject?
This is an enormous problem, a serious problem, and it's a problem that dentists are going to have to solve. And the problem clearly is that, as you mentioned, most dentists waste enormous amounts of money on marketing collateral. They're wasting money on things like direct mail, websites, the emails they send, yellow pages, although I don't think dentists are wasting as much money on this as they used to. Coupon mailers, discounted coupons they send out to everybody in their neighborhood within a certain radius of their practice. Facebook and Google PPC ads, and on we could go. Not that some of those things aren't effective, because certainly they are, and they're very effective if they're done right. But I think the fact that most of the marketing that dentists pay for isn't generating a profit, and a lot of it doesn't even pay for itself, so profit, and a lot of it doesn't even pay for itself, so they're losing money on it. I think this might be why so many dentists actually believe incorrectly that marketing doesn't work for them like it works for so many other types of businesses. That marketing as an entity is an expense and not an investment. Now, if we eliminate all the folks out there who are using marketing strategies, say from back like in the 1980s, and you know the ones I'm talking about, the ones who still believe that mailing those discount coupons, as I just mentioned, to everyone within a 3-mile radius of your practice, or mailing birthday cards to patients in the practice, and that's somehow going to magically attract these fee-for-service new patients that every dentist wants. If we eliminate jokers like that, I think it's fair to say that the primary reason that marketing doesn't work for most dentists is simple, and that's that their messaging and their communication strategies are flawed and filled with mistakes.
Can you give me a few examples of mistakes that dentists are making with their messaging and communications?
One of the biggest mistakes I see dentists making with their messaging is that it's the same message that virtually every other dentist is using. It's milquetoast and boring. It's look at me and what I've accomplished. And as I'll explain in just a few minutes, it makes the dentist the hero and not the patient. Listen, patients are not looking for a hero. They're looking for a guide, a mentor, if you will, who can show them the way. Take as an example the dentist website. Most of these websites are beautifully designed, and I think it's fair to say that most dentists love the layout and how they look. And because their website is beautifully laid out and it quote-unquote looks pretty, they fully expect their brand new website to generate lots and lots of new patients. But guess what happens? Nothing happens. No phone calls and no new patients, and here's why. The designers in the dental website companies know how to make things pretty, but pretty is not what gets patients to call and make an appointment with you. Patients call and schedule an appointment because they heard or read words on your website that made them want to call your office. It's the way that you talk about your services that gets new patients to call and schedule with you. It's how your existing patients, in the form of video testimonials on your website, talk about the services that you deliver. Designers and dental website companies have never studied how to write compelling copy that gets people to take action. So as crazy as it sounds, dentists are trusting their entire online presence to an individual or a company that isn't a highly trained expert who knows how to compel people to take action. Think about the last time you bought something on Amazon. So you hit Amazon, you go there. Do you just immediately look at the picture of a product that you want to buy and then click buy? No, what do? You read the description and then take it from there, take it a step further. What do? You read the reviews. Now, I don't know about you, but I read 2 to 3 books a week. I love to read. I'm addicted to reading. And what I do is I don't just simply look at the cover of a book and buy the book, I read the description. And then the next logical process is to read the reviews. And that's exactly what your patients are doing, your prospective new patients, when they hit your website. They're not simply looking at all the stock photos they see on every other dentist website in the world that are exactly the same ones you're using on your website. They're going to actually read the copy. And it's the copy that compels them to take action. It is not the pictures. And it's not the layout. It's the words on your website.
So we've been talking about how weak and that most dentists are dealing with this. So my question is there a solution to this problem? And if so, how do we fix it?
Well, that's a great question. If dentists can make their messaging really clear about the specific services that they're offering and about the high-end cosmetic and resources services that they're offering, and most importantly, why prospective patients should want to see them, they're going to stand out in the marketplace and be seen as the obvious choice to these people. People who want to get a full mouth restoration or people who are looking for a solution to their TMJ pain usually don't become patients of the best dentists. They become patients of the dentists who have communicated the clearest. People don't become patients of the best dentists. They become patients of the dentist who have messaging that they can understand the fastest. Now, obviously, it's important to provide the highest level and quality of dental care possible. But make no mistake about it. You're in a race to get people to understand why they need to call you for these high-value specialized services that they want. And if your competitors are delivering inferior results, but they're a better communicator, you're losing new patients to them and you're losing a lot more of them than you realize.
Well, why do you think that is? Give me an example.
An example as to why lesser-skilled dentists oftentimes are getting the majority of new patients in a given market? Sure, that's easy. because prospective patients never knew about the dentist who could provide the superior level of results for them, because the dentists with superior skills aren't utilizing clear, concise, effective messaging and communications. High-value patients never discover why it would be in their best interest to call the more qualified and skilled dentist. Everybody knows that when you want information or when you're looking for something, especially when it's something as important as high-end dentistry, the first thing that people are going to do is they're going to look on Google. Well, not my patients. I get all of my patients by referral, and none of them are finding us online. If that's the mindset that you have, listen, you're probably 100% correct. Other than your Me Too carbon copy website that looks like every other dentist website, you don't have a presence online. So of course you're not getting new patients from the internet. But ask yourself this question. If you had a dominant presence online, and if you were using clear, concise messaging and communications on your website, and it was built to function as a high-converting website, how many more of these high-value cases would you be seeing each month?
So Ken, what you're saying is that these fee-for-service, high-value patients that all the dentists are trying to attract, that you need to have a message that they can quickly and easily understand so that it reels them in fast.
That is exactly what I'm saying. Here are two things about the human brain that once you understand will help you create more clear and effective messaging and communications. When your brain has to make a decision, and this occurs 100% of the time in every situation and in every instance, when your brain has to make a decision, your brain is asking itself on a subconscious level, is this potential choice going to, number one, help me survive? Or two, is it going to help me thrive?
So does this have anything to do with Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Bingo, you nailed it. So most of us are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and if you're not, let me quickly explain it. Maslow theorized that ingrained within every human's DNA is a blueprint for self-preservation in life, so that the first priority of a human being is going to be to meet physiological needs, like getting food and water and clothing and things like that. And then the second priority, and this is moving from like a pyramid, so imagine you're looking at a triangle or a pyramid and we're working from the base and we're working towards the top. The second priority for self-preservation is to take care of safety needs, like finding shelter and then finding other humans, kind of like you, that you can actually join forces with, people who are going to help support you, people who are going to fight to defend you and protect you when the space aliens attack. We all want to be part of a larger group because, as they say, there's safety in numbers. And once you've taken care of that, the next priority on Maslow's chart is love and belonging, which means that we want to find a spouse, or a mate so that we can end up procreating. From there, Maslow has two more levels or elements on his chart. The first of those two being esteem, which means that people are going to do things that make them feel better about themselves, like getting veneers or Invisalign or teeth whitening or whatever, right? And then the last element, which is the pinnacle of his chart, is self-actualization, which again, if you think about the last patient you had that you did a full mouth restoration on, or that last biorejuvenation case you had where the guy actually came in and said, yeah, I'm the VP of finance at my company and I'm actually being considered for CEO. Turns out the old man is retiring and I want to get every advantage I can to get this job. So I think I want to get my teeth done. So that covers Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but let me tell you a quick story so you can kind of see how this works in action. So at the last Mass Referral 2.0 seminar that I did, we had about 28, 29 dentists in the room. We were actually covering so much information, we ended up running late. And so I got the bright idea. I said, hey, listen, the only way we're going to be able to cover all this information and get it done today is if you guys stay here and let me buy you lunch. So we'll do what I call like a working lunch. And everybody was okay with that. So I bought everybody lunch. We worked through lunch and then we finished. Now, why did I do that? Did I do that just because I wanted to be friendly, or did I do that just because I wanted to, get all the work done? Well, a little of both. But ultimately, I did that so that I could get these people on my side, so that literally, if space aliens were to attack, I could count on these guys and these ladies to actually fight with me to help defend me. There's truth in what I just said, but actually on a more accurate level, the reason that I did that, number one, is because I wanted to get through the content and we were running late, but also because I wanted to build a relationship with these people. And by me buying lunch, I basically said, hey, yeah, I'm kind of like you. I'm part of your group. We became a unit at that point. And so as a result, me buying lunch, and it ended up generating a lot more sales for us at that particular event. Now, on a more familiar note, think about the last time one of your employees brought you a cup of Starbucks coffee, right? Are they doing that just to be friendly or just to be kind? Well, maybe they are. Maybe they think they are. But on a deeper subconscious level, they're doing that to create a deeper, more meaningful relationship with you, which if you think about it, It's going to be much more difficult to get rid of someone if they're constantly bringing you coffees or they're constantly doing nice things. If all else is equal and you got 2 employees and you've got to get rid of one or the other, but one of them has consistently brought you coffee, everything else is equal, which one are you probably going to keep and which one are you probably going to get rid of? Chances are good that the employee who's been bringing you coffee on a regular basis is probably going to have more security in their job than the person who hasn't. So this is how everybody thinks. It is literally ingrained in our DNA. Okay, well, what does that tell us about the way we want to communicate with our patients? Well, it means this. If what you're communicating about your practice and about the specific services you offer, if that messaging isn't directly connected to helping them survive and thrive, they're not going to pay attention to your message. That's the data they're looking for. They're looking for information that's going to say, you're going to help me feel more confident. You're going to help me feel more youthful, more beautiful, more attractive. You're going to help me feel more secure. You're going to help me experience a better quality of life. You're going to help me get rid of this TMJ pain, these headaches, this jaw pain, this tinnitus, the clicking and popping, and the vertigo, right? And just like every human being's brain, your prospective patient's brain on a subconscious level is literally saying, hey, listen, I'm trying to survive and thrive here, and I'm always scanning the environment for data that's going to help me do that.
Okay, so Ken, give us some specific examples of how this plays out on a daily basis for most dentists.
Yeah, sure, I can do that. So when a prospective patient hits your website or they make it into your office for an appointment, and the first thing that you tell them is how your dad started the practice 40 years ago, or you tell them about all the certifications and training you have, or you tell them about all the awards you've won, you're making a huge mistake and they're going to tune you out. Using messaging like this is a problem. It is a significant problem, and it's a problem because of the second thing that the brain is always trying to do, which is to conserve calories, to conserve energy. Think about this. I think about when I went to chiropractic college. Very long days, lots and lots of study, lots of time in lecture, lots of time in like anatomy lab, and just all the different stuff that we went through. Lots and long days. Okay, I'll just put it simply. Very long days. Okay, now think back to the time when you were in dental school. Think how exhausted you felt going through days when all you did was sit on your rump all day, listening to lectures and studying. Now, why did you get so tired? Why did you get so exhausted? You were just sitting around. You got so tired because your brain was burning massive amounts of calories. So when your brain has to process lots of data that it knows has nothing to do with its survival, it literally starts to shut down. It says, hey, listen, I don't need this information. So when a prospective new patient hits your website, or when a new patient comes in for their initial appointment, and right out of the gate, they're hearing about how your dad started the practice. And listen, there's nothing wrong with those things, but you got to get your messaging right and get these things in order. So when they're hearing about how your dad started the practice, or about all the certifications and all the training you have, all the status symbols you want to throw at them, or about all the awards you've won, they're going to check out mentally because they're hearing your story, not theirs. Patients are focused on their story. And while you might end up playing a role in their story, a very, very important role at that, you've got to understand that as long as you play the part of the hero in their story, meaning as long as you talk about you and your story, patients are going to continue tuning you out, and they're going to continue looking for someone who can serve as their guide, as their mentor. So I'll take this a step further and share a story with you guys. Lisa and I were actually living in Portland at the time. Lisa, you probably remember this, but we were living in Portland, and I ended up getting in an accident of some sort. I was playing basketball or something at the gym, and I got hit in the mouth, and one of my teeth got cracked. A big chunk got knocked off. Well, as it turns out, my dentist, the dentist that I'd been using at the time, he was out of town. He was on vacation, unavailable. So I ended up going to a dentist about 30 minutes away, who the dentist office where I'd actually been going, they referred me to that dentist. So the dentist was gone, but the staff said, hey, listen, you can go see this guy. He'll totally take care of you. So I get to their office. I'm thinking, they know the deal. They know that I have a dentist. They know that I already have a relationship with this dentist. But nevertheless, they have me fill out the paperwork. And what happens next, I will never forget. And I actually stayed and sat through the appointment only because I needed my tooth fixed, number one. And number two, because I really learned from this experience. So as I walk into the office, I go into this exam room / consultation room, whatever you want to call it. There's a big table in there. And the doctor comes in, the dentist comes in, and he starts talking to me. And the first thing he does is he says, hey, come here. I want to show you something real quick. And he takes me over, and in the middle of his office, you're not going to believe this, but it's true. In the middle of this guy's office, he's got a Harley Davidson motorcycle that's completely enclosed in glass and like a big display case. He wanted to show me this Harley Davidson motorcycle. Then he took me along this wall, paraded me along this wall. Mind you, this is before he ever asked me a single thing about my fractured tooth, asking me whether I was in pain or not, asking me anything. he took me on a little display of his quote-unquote theater. Showed me pictures of all the quote-unquote famous people that he had as patients in his practice. Showed me all the places where he graduated from, his awards, all these different things, but the motorcycle is what got me. But before I actually got to the point that, they did my exam, they shot the film, shot the radiographs, but before we got to the point of them actually fixing my tooth, and he knew why I was there. He knew that I had a dentist. He knew that I had a relationship with this dentist. Check this out. I'm not kidding. The guy sits me down and proceeds to give me a $30,000 treatment plan for essentially what you would call a full mouth restoration. Now, this was a few years ago. This was back in like 2011, but I will never forget this. And I think this serves as a really kind of an extreme example, but nevertheless, an example that clearly illustrates the point. The guy didn't care about me. He didn't care about my story. He cared about his story. And so, yeah, he fixed my tooth, but there was no possible way. I don't care if the guy was the best dentist in the world. I don't care if I had 30 grand just to burn. The fact is, this guy lost me the moment he stopped listening to my story and wanted to force his story down my throat.
Yeah, well, that just brings up an issue. I mean, for me, I know you agree that we would love to own more property than we have right now because, someday I would like to have donkeys as pets, like on our property. And so I need more if I'm going to do that. And that's going to help me thrive. So I completely understand what you're talking about.
Listen, guys, I got to deal with this donkey thing almost on a daily basis, as if having horses isn't enough. We got to have donkeys and goats and chickens and stuff like that. And I'm all for that kind of stuff. But where this donkey thing comes from, I have no idea. But she wants not just donkeys, she wants these miniature, these little tiny donkeys that seem to me as a horse guy, I'm used to like big animals, and these little miniature donkey things, I don't know, they're kind of creepy, but nevertheless, that's what she wants. And if that's what the beautiful and talented Lisa wants, obviously, I'm going to give it to her.
So tell me a little bit about dental websites in terms of the copy when it's too technical. When the doctor is talking over the patient's head and using all that dental lingo that nobody understands. Or how in a case presentation, the same thing happens. They are speaking over the patient's head. And so later, of course, the patient has to go.
Same exact principle applies here. And that is this. The moment that your messaging and your communications focus on you, what you're doing, your services, your definitions, your lingo, whatever it is, your patients are going to start to lose interest in you, and they're going to start to mentally check out. They're going to mentally start looking. They're going to start searching. Their brain is going to start saying, hey, listen, I'm burning a lot of useless calories here. This doesn't make sense. Maybe we're in the wrong place after all. So utilizing technical speak, dental speak, if you will, and we'll talk about the curse of knowledge here in just a little bit, but talking over your patient's head, whether it's in a case presentation, whether it's in an office visit, whether it's in your website copy, doesn't matter. You've got to talk in language they can understand, and you've got to talk in a way that pulls them in and keeps them as the hero in their own story.
Well, at this point, I think it's obvious that anybody who's listening is probably agreeing with you at this point, and they understand the need for their messaging and their communication strategies to be improving And so I guess the biggest question is, what's the best way to go about starting the process in terms of making those improvements?
That's a great question. And what this means for you then is that your messaging and your communications must be delivered in a manner that helps your patients survive and thrive. And in addition to helping them survive and thrive, your messaging must be delivered in a way that's simple and easy to understand so that your patients' brains don't literally have to eat up a lot of energy trying to understand it. Listen, this is a writer downer. Write this down. The dentist who can consistently communicate the clearest in the marketplace gets the most high-value new patients. We call those HVPs. And the vast majority of HVPs don't become patients of the best dentists. They become patients at the dentist who have messaging that they can understand the fastest. You're in a race against your competitors, and the dentist who can deliver clear messaging and communications to the marketplace the fastest is going to win the majority of the time. Information about you, your practice, or your process with a patient, be it on your website or in a face-to-face interaction with a new patient, I want you to picture yourself handing them a 7-pound bowling ball, right? Now, if you handed me a 7-pound bowling ball right now, I could hold it all right. And, obviously it wouldn't be too difficult. But then you want to share something else about you or your practice, so you hand me another 7-pound bowling ball. So now I'm actually holding 2 bowling balls. And then you want to hand me a 3rd bowling ball, but when you hand it to me, you use some kind of language, some sort of dental speak, some sort of language that I'm not familiar with, and you're actually making my brain burn even more calories? That's like taking the 3rd bowling ball and coating it with baby oil before you handed it to me. So I'm holding 2 balls and I've got a third that I can't quite get a grip on because it's so slippery. So what happens when you hand me the 4th bowling ball? How many bowling balls do I drop? All of them. And it's exactly what's happening to your patients right now when you talk about yourself and your practice. So when you're pouring out all this verbal vomit on your patients, you're talking about technical or anatomical issues, using words that are over their head, talking about your certifications, your awards, your training, talking about how your dad or your mom started the practice like a bazillion years ago, you're going to lose them by the 4th bowling ball. That's when they're going to start mentally checking out, thinking about their kids, their money, their plans, whatever. The moment your messaging becomes too much, your patients lose touch and they check out. When you confuse, you lose.
You had me read something recently that was talking about the curse of knowledge and how that can actually weaken that doctors have. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, let's listen to what Chris Anderson, the curator of TED Talks, has to say about the curse of knowledge, and then I'll go ahead and follow up on it.
How do you make good presentations? I think it's astonishingly hard actually to do it because everyone suffers from something that Steve Pinker calls the curse of knowledge. When you know something, you actually can't remember what it's like not to know it. I mean, you just can't. And so when you explain it to someone, 9 times out of 10, you start from a place where they aren't, and they don't really understand what you're saying. And that is the reason why so many talks and presentations fail. So if you think about it, what's happening during a great talk, it's a real miracle. You are transferring an idea from your mind to those listening. And it's this incredibly complex neurological thing. I mean, if you could actually map it, it would probably be billions, literally billions of neurons go to make this pattern. How on earth do you get a pattern that involves billions of neurons to transfer to another mind? The only way you can do it is step by step. That is the key metaphor for me, is you think of a talk or a presentation as a journey. You start where your audience is, and you give them a reason to want to come with you on this journey. So make them curious, make them care about a problem, make them care about you somehow, and then take them step by step with each little contribution to the idea adding up a little bit so that they don't get lost in jargon or wonder where on earth you're going. Those are the keys to it. To actually execute on that is hard, but thinking of it as a journey helps.
Okay, so as you just heard, the curse of knowledge actually weakens your messaging and your communications because you're projecting your knowledge onto your patients. Now, to be fair here, I think most dentists, when they're discussing treatment options and outcomes, aren't talking to their patients the same way that they'd actually talk to another dentist, but they're still projecting their knowledge and experience onto those patients. Well, what does this mean for you? Well, this means that while you've dumbed down the conversation, and I say that with all due respect to the patient, but while you've dumbed down the conversation, your messaging is still somewhere around a level 6. So like if you looked at the dentist, if you look at your level of knowledge, you're up at a 10. And you're communicating with a patient whose level of knowledge and skill and understanding about dentistry, the practice of dentistry, is probably around like a 1. And your messaging is still somewhere around a level 6. Now, the problem with that is that the human brain makes buying decisions between levels 1 and 3. Remember, patients are looking for information that will help them survive and thrive. They're looking for information that they can understand quickly and easily, and dentists are missing out on enormous them survive and thrive. They're looking for information that they can understand quickly and easily, and dentists are missing out on enormous amounts of new patient traffic and production because their messaging and communication strategies have not been constructed in a way that's magnetic and irresistible to the HVPs that they're trying to get into their office. Remember, HVPs are high-value patients. If I was actually going to identify or actually nail down the biggest single mistake that dentists are making, it's that they're not making their messaging and communications about, quote unquote, about their patients and the needs of those patients. So in light of that, ask yourself this question. Is the message that you're communicating to these HVPs, your high-value cosmetic and restorative new patients, helping them understand how to survive and thrive? I mean, think about it. Think about the messaging on, as an example, your website. Think about the emails that you send to your patients. Think about the direct mail you send out to people in your community. Think about the Facebook and Google PPC ads you're running. Think about the consultation or case presentation that you just gave. Did you talk about what your patient needs and how it pertains to them surviving and thriving? Because really that's all they're interested in the first place. Now, the second question I have is this. Is your message clear, simple, and easy to understand? Have you avoided the curse of knowledge? Now, if you answered no to either one of those questions, I've got good news for you. In coming episodes, we're actually going to be giving you the methods and tools that are going to allow you to create messaging and communications for your practice that those HVPs, the cosmetic and restorative high-value new patients, are going to find magnetic and irresistible. And by the time we've gone through the first 7 to 10 episodes of the DotCom Dentist podcast, you're going to have a minimum of 7 areas of messaging figured out so you can communicate clearly and effectively with those HVPs and with all the rest of the patients in your practice. And those messages are going to get your HVPs to respond because they're going to be simple and clear, and they'll have to do with your patient's survival and their ability to thrive. Okay, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today's show, but before we do, I just want to cover a few more right. But listen, I don't want you to worry about that because I've got an amazing tool that I've created for you. This is a tool you can use to assess your messaging and your communications. And you can actually download this free tool by using the link in the show notes or by visiting the DotCom Dentist website at www.dotcomdentist.co. It's not a .com, it's a .co /clear-messaging-2. It's all lowercase. And that would be the number 2, not the word 2. So when you download the PDF worksheet for today's episode, you're going to see that it contains 3 questions. And with those questions, there's a sliding scale where you can actually rate the messaging and communications that you're currently using on a scale of 1 to 10 based on the information that we've covered in today's episode. So here's question number 1. Is your message and your communications helping patients understand how you can help them survive and thrive, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being obviously the low side, 10 being the high side, can your patients survive and thrive, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being obviously the low side, 10 being the high side, can your patients understand what you offer them, and does that offer associate with their survival? Have you given them the soundbite? Help them memorize the soundbite that lets your patients know, hey, here's what's in it for you. If you haven't done that, you're at a 1. If you've done it a little bit, like you're at a 2 or 3. If you have a soundbite that every patient who's ever interacted with you can remember and repeat, messaging that has to do specifically with their survival, then you're all the way at a level 10. So take a second and give yourself a score from 1 to 10. Next question, question number 2. Can your patients name the main problem your practice solves if we ask them? So as an example, if you're a high-end cosmetic and restorative dentist and you're a master graduate of the Pankey Institute, can your patients name the main problem your practice solves if we ask them? If you're a biorejuvenation dentist, and if you want your practice to be known for amazing patient transformation, both physiologically and aesthetically, can your patients name the main problem that your practice solves if we ask them? If you're a general dentist and your focus is on families, can your patients name the main problem your practice solves if we ask them? So you get the picture here. Listen, you're going to hear me say this over and over again on this podcast, and I'm going to say it again now. The only reason any patient ever comes to you is because they have a problem and they're hoping that you can help them solve it. And so I want to ask you, have you defined that problem so clearly that all of your patients understand, when I suffer with X, I go to that dentist. When I feel frustration and my confidence is diminished because of my lame teeth, I go to that dentist. When I have chronic TMJ pain and all the symptoms associated with TMD and my teeth are wearing out irregularly, I go to that dentist. Have you identified that problem so clearly that the cue of the problem causes the behavior of calling you, which causes the reward of solving that problem? If you haven't done that, you haven't defined the problem clearly, and you need to do that. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how clearly is the problem that you solve for your patients defined? Now, before I review question number 3 with you, you might be telling yourself, well, how do I do this when I provide so many different treatment options for my patients? That's a great question. Let me answer that with a question of my own. Do you want to be known for emergency extractions and being the go-to dentist for Medicaid patients? Do you want to be known as the dentist who only sees insurance patients and doesn't do any high-end cosmetic or restorative dentistry? So here's my suggestion. Start by focusing on the thing that you'd really like to be known for, the service that you provide, and fill out the question for that. You know, the neat thing about this process is that you can do this for any and every part of your practice, but the DotCom Dentist podcast is about helping you target HVPs, right, with an ultra high level of specificity. High value, fee-for-service, i.e. cash, cosmetic, and restorative patients. Those are HVPs. Yes, obviously, these methods are going to They want more of these HVPs. Okay, let's take a look at the final question, which is question number 3. Is your message clear and simple? So on a scale of 1 to 10, can patients really understand the story you're inviting them into? Do they know what service you provide, and do they know what problem you solve? Now, if you've positioned yourself as the guide, if you've given them a simple plan that makes it easy to work with you, have you called them into action so they know without a doubt what they need to do in order to solve this problem? And the last part of this question is, have you painted a picture of the stakes, the outcomes, the happy life they're going to have if they become your patient, and the unhappy life they're going to have if they don't become your patient? So how clear is your message on a scale of 1 to 10? And go ahead and fill out question number 3. All right, so if after you filled out this worksheet you discover that you scored poorly, don't worry about it. I'm going to be solving these and other messaging and communication problems with you over the coming episodes of the DotCom Dentist podcast, which is a great reason to subscribe to the show. And when you click on that DotCom Dentist podcast, which is a great reason to subscribe to the show, and when you click on that subscribe button, you're making sure that you have access to all this information. So on the next episode, which is going to be episode number 3, I'm going to be unveiling the solution and the simple steps you can take to create compelling, magnetic, and irresistible messaging and communications for your marketing collateral, your website, and your face-to-face communications with your patients.
Our objective with this podcast is to help you and your practice stand out in the marketplace by crystallizing your messaging and communication